We're sitting in Lynell Skarda's office at the Citizens Bank in Clovis, New Mexico. I'm Richard Rowley, and we're going to visit with Mr. Skarda this morning. The date is September 27th, 2007. Mr. Skarda, how are you this morning?
Well, I'm in my usual delightful mood.
You recently had a birthday, I know.
Yes, I don't talk about that too much.
Well, I'm going to ask you anyway. I think you just turned 92 years of age.
That is correct. August 28, 1915.
Let me ask you this, and you and I have visited a lot over the years, and so I have a fair amount of background for you and your family, but you weren't born in the Clovis area, were you?
Yes, I was.
Oh, were you? Okay.
I was born here. My two brothers were born here.
And your parents came from where?
My mother came from, I guess you'd have to say Texas, but my father came really from Arkansas originally. He was in Memphis, and when they had the giveaway of the farmland, he came out here with $8 in his pocket to Texaco. And then when Clovis was started, why, he moved to Clovis.
Well, was he a farmer then when he first came to this part of the country?
No, he was really a bookkeeper. He'd gone to business school in Memphis, and he was a bookkeeper.
Now, I know that your family, your father was the president and chairman of the board of this bank for many, many years, beginning back in the early 1900s. And, of course, your family's owned this bank, I guess, since when?
A good while.
Good while. Your father, I know, passed away a number of years ago, and I knew him and always was delighted to visit with him. He was a real character.
Yeah, he was a character.
And you had two brothers, Langdon and Cash, and I know Cash was a banker.
Yeah.
And Langdon did what? I never.
He ended up farming. Both Lang and Cash went to Washington and Lee School of Law, just as I did. Both of them passed the bar. Lang worked for the state for about a year and ceased having anything to do with the law. He became a farmer. And Cash, of course, as you well know, came into the bank.
Right.
But all three of us were members of the bar.
Well, now, were you and your brothers the only children that your parents had?
That's right.
Okay. Tell me, Lynell, what prompted you to decide to go to law school? Was that something that you...
My father really wanted me to. I went to Berkeley undergraduate. I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the College of Chemistry. Of course, when I was in college, we were at the very sprawling depths of the Depression. Tuition at Berkeley was $21 a semester, and nobody had the $21. Lab fees were $9 a semester. Nobody had the $9. It was a big school then, about 15,000 students at Berkeley, and times were tough.
How did you end up at Berkeley?
I really don't know. I graduated, my mother lived in California, and we boys went out there for our education, and I just sort of migrated to Berkeley. I didn't realize at the time that I was going there that it was a school quite as prestigious as it is. Was then and is now. But anyway, I got into Berkeley, and I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the scientific part of it. Berkeley, as you may or may not be aware, is one of the leading schools in science, especially nuclear. We had them all at Berkeley. Lawrence won the Nobel Prize there. He was our chief physicist. And Oppenheimer and all those people went to Berkeley.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Skarda. I know you were in the military for a period of time during World War II, and I never know, did you finish law school before you went in the military, or did you go to law school after the military?
No, I finished law school before. I got out of law school in 1941, and I went to work for Judge Sam G. Bratton of the United States Court of Appeals. Now, you probably don't remember Judge Sam G. Bratton, but he was really the first district judge of the 9th Judicial District.
So he was practicing law here in Clovis at one time.
He was a judge on the 5th Circuit, and which was Roswell. And they peeled off and created the 9th Judicial District, and he became the resident judge here.
So he moved from Roswell to Clovis?
Right. And I clerked for him just for a year. I was his first law clerk. And Sam Bratton was really a marvelous man. People ought to write some books about him, but he was a very fine judge, district judge. And then he ran for the New Mexico Supreme Court and was on the New Mexico Supreme Court. And then he ran for the United States Senate, and the great change from Republican to Democrat in the state came, and was elected to the Senate. And he was a marvelous speaker. He was rather short and red-headed, but just a great speaker. And great demand as a speaker everywhere. He probably gave more graduation speeches than anybody in the history of New Mexico. But he gave the opening address in California for the Franklin D. Roosevelt campaign.
Oh, that's something that's interesting.
And supposedly he was going to be the first appointment to the Supreme Court of the United States. And unfortunately, he had never gone to law school, as many of our lawyers in New Mexico had not done also. And so he ended up on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Now, is Howard Bratton, who was the United States District Court judge, is that his son?
That's his son.
Okay.
He was a very fine judge, too.
I knew him and tried a case or two.
Fine judge.
Let me ask you this. This would have been in the early 40s when you were working for Judge Bratton. Then I guess you went into the military after that.
Yeah, I went into the military. I went in, funny, I went in as a glider pilot. I wanted to fly. But my eyes were such that the only eye examination I could pass would be that for a glider pilot. So I enlisted. Went down to Fort Bliss, and 2 weeks after I was down there, haven't even been sent to basic training yet, they eliminated the glider program. So I ended up going to Miami Beach Air Corps officer training and went through that course, and I got out, and I was high enough in my class I could select where I wanted to go. And they had an opening at Deming Army Airfield, which was a bomber training field. So I went to Deming Army Airfield. I was in the Judge Advocate's office. Now, the Judge Advocate's office in the old Air Corps, I always say it's the only thing that the Air Corps ever conceived of that was new. But they established legal offices at all their bases. And now all the services do that.
So the first...
The Navy, this is one of the first base legal offices opened up.
Of course, it was the Army Air Corps, I guess, back then, wasn't it? Yeah.
And I was down there, I don't know, a couple of years, and I managed to maneuver to get transferred to the Judge Advocate General's Department. And the Judge Advocate General's Department at that time, I think it's substantially the same way. You only had members of it at general headquarters that had general court-martial jurisdiction or in the Washington office. And I went to the Washington office and had a great time writing opinions on civil matters. wrote jillion opinions, and we had quite an office. We finally moved over into the Pentagon, and
So how long were you in the military then?
almost 4 years.
So right up to the end of the war.
Yeah, after the end of the war.
After you got out of the military, then did you come right to Clovis? Or
Yeah.
were you married at that time?
Yeah.
So your wife, Catherine, of course, who I knew, been deceased now for a number of years, but she was out there in Washington with you.
But she didn't go to Washington with me. She was a little bit pregnant then.
Oh.
So she stayed home with Mama.
Oh, okay. Now, she was a member of the Burns family that was an old-time family here in
Frank
Clovis.
S. and Mary Burns.
Right, right.
He was a realtor.
Realtor and is in the, I think, didn't they have some insurance business or something?
Yeah, insurance, and he had a big farm.
Now, you and Catherine had, I know,
We had
four kiddos, two boys and two girls.
Everything 50-50 in my house.
No discrimination.
No discrimination.
Well, tell me, Mr. Skarda, I know you've been, of course, involved in banking, the law profession ever since you came back to Clovis, and I know you originally had your office at the old bank building over on the corner of Grand and Main here in Clovis. And I guess your office has always been in
That's what
connection
kept
with
me alive walking up those damn steps.
Well, I'd say you're pretty fit for somebody 92 years old. Not
I
very
walk up
many.
steps good anymore.
You've always had your office in connection with the bank, as I recall.
That's
Is
right.
that correct? Okay. Tell me about kind of what you've observed as changes in the legal profession over the many years of your career.
Well, it's not the same law, as you well know, because you're not a recent member of the bar. You're an old member of the bar. We make a living now entirely differently than we did in the early days. In the early days, we examined abstracts of title, quieted title, probated estates, which we still do today. Very little tort law at all, very little, almost minimal. Litigation, contracts, and that type of thing. And of course, an occasional criminal case. Not many. Today, it's mostly tort.
I know that you're proficient on a computer, and that's always kind of amazed me because most people my age, and I'm considerably younger than you are, even though I've been around for a while, but, are kind of reluctant to fool with the computer when it comes to their law practice or what have you. And I know you've made it a point to get proficient and use it all the time, and that, did you just decide that that's something that you needed to do or you wanted to do? Or?
I thought I needed to do it. I think everybody needs to do it. I've tried to give away computers to older people, and it's amazing to me how many of them refuse to accept it and to use it. But really, it's the most entertaining gadget that's ever been invented. There's just no question about it. And of course, a great source of information. As a matter of fact, they're putting books on them now, entire books.
Right.
And really, the computer, it just changed everything. Changed the commercial world, changed banking. It's changed the practice of the law. You want to file something in the bankruptcy court, you file it on your damn computer.
Right.
Federal District Court. I hate it, that part of it.
Right.
I think everything ought to be on paper and signed by the damn lawyer. But
Well, I know, our district court library is kind of a thing of the past.
It's
We
gone.
had to have a lot of books, and
it's gone. When I first started out with my computer, I got on Westlaw, and they were charging me, I think, $11,000 a year for $11,000 or $12,000 a year, which I thought was somewhat excessive. Now it's down. I think I pay about $6,500 a year for it, and I have almost everything
Right.
that I need.
You have access to more, I'm sure,
Yeah.
than we ever did in the library.
Right.
So,
I even got law reports on them.
but tell me, Lynell, I know you've been involved in a lot of appellate decisions over the years, and of course, a lot of your trial work and those types of things have been involved, cases that involve the banking issues and that sort of thing. Tell me, give me a little rundown about how much litigation you've been involved in, appellate litigation in particular, over the years. And
I don't know. I've had 22 appeals to the Supreme Court of New Mexico, one to the Court of Appeals. I've had petition for certiorari twice in the United States Supreme Court. One of them was granted and argued, and we won it. I was with D.Z. Blythe on that case. And then I had one petition that was denied. And but I guess that's a good bit for a lone practitioner.
From Clovis, New Mexico,
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
think. Yes. Tell me a little bit about any that you recall that you think were really interesting cases that had unique, interesting issues involved in them.
Well, the most interesting one is the one I lost. I took the position that you couldn't kill your mother and inherit from her. And the New Mexico Supreme Court said you could. And he did.
Was that before we had a statute that...
Yeah, before the statute, and after that they passed the statute. Always hour late and $1 short,
Well, I was not aware of that case.
That was the case.
How long ago was that?
It was in Portales. And,
Well, that had to be a good many years ago.
yeah, the Lindley case. Not the Lindley case, the Reagan case, Reagan versus Brown. That was decided in 1955.
For Pete's sake, that's a new one for me.
I think it's a wrong decision. I think morally it's wrong. I've never been able to determine personally where moral issues evolve down into compelling a judicial decision. I think probably a great deal more than the bar appreciates. The court took the position that the cases were evenly decided. We had 48 states then, 24 for and 24 against, killing your mother and inheriting from her. And they decided that the statute was the statute, period, which of course is the easy way out. And so he inherited from her.
Well, that is a new one on me. Well, tell me about, if you can think of any others that you had that...
Well, no, nothing that I would say would be particularly earth-shaking.
Well, let me ask you this then. Weren't you a member of the original group that drafted the uniform jury instructions in New Mexico?
Yeah, that's something. I don't know, you ever see, whether you ever got this book or not, but if I can find it, it's here somewhere.
Is that the original UJI book you're thinking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one at my office. I know what you're
Here
talking
it is down here. This one right here.
Right.
I wish they had it fixed like this instead of putting it in the code. It's much handier to use this way.
Right.
But that was really quite an experience.
How many of you, do you remember how many of you had really worked on that project?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. 11 of us. There was John Catron, Santa Fe, George W. Hannett, Henry A. Kiger Jr., Judge D.A. McPherson Jr., Don G. McCormick,
Remember him?
Charles Batt, Charles D. Olmsted, you remember him?
I remember him.
George L. Reeves Jr. Roswell,
I knew
Judge
him.
George. Lewis R. Sutton, remember Judge
I
Sutton?
remember Judge Sutton.
He was something. And Judge Joe W. Wood, Judge Joe W. Wood, he was on the appellate Court of Appeals. And then the chairman of it, above all, was Joseph E. Rail. And he was a great one.
That was a pretty distinguished group of people, I can tell you.
I was the worst lawyer of the group, I think. But I ended up, we did this twice. We did this thing twice. This is the first book, and then we did it a second time. Went all over it, revised the whole thing. And
well, now, was this a committee created by the Supreme Court?
By the Supreme Court, yeah. And I never even got my transportation to Albuquerque. What I would do, I would leave here Saturday morning. We met usually Saturday. We met most of the time the Public Service Building in Albuquerque. They provided a big room for us. And I'd drive up there. We'd have the meeting. I'd drive back that night, come down here at the office in the morning, and dictate the minutes, which were quite voluminous, 25, 30 pages every meeting. Mail them out to everybody, and then we'd have them for the next week.
How often did you guys meet?
Oh, God, I don't know. We met an awful lot.
How long did this project take anyway?
Took over a year the first go-round. Probably less than a year the second go-round.
That was,
it was a great contribution to the bar.
Oh, I thought it was a tremendous project.
And certainly educational to the lawyers on it.
Oh, I'll bet.
But Joe Rail, he is the one I think that really deserves the kudos. He kept it together, and he was a magnificent lawyer, really a great lawyer. You couldn't bring up a subject hardly with which he was not familiar. He had a broad experience in the law, and he was just great. And he held the committee together and did a staggering amount of work himself. He's never received the credit for it that he should have received.
Let me ask you about a couple of other old-time lawyers that were here. And I know Carl Hatch at one time practiced law here in Clovis. Did you know him? Did you?
Great lawyer. Went to Cumberland Law School, the one-year law school in Cumberland, Tennessee. But he was really a fine judge. And sadly, he was district judge here, and then he went back to practice, and he became district judge again. And he was Democratic state chairman. And from that, he proceeded on up.
Wasn't he a United States Senate? Yeah, I was thinking.
And of course, it's the principal author of the Hatch Act, that
right.
Federal employees can't participate in politics, which I think is a desirable statute. And I think most of them abide by it. I don't think most of them do. But he was really he knew an awful lot of law. And he went up and he spent his later years as U.S. district judge. And his eyesight failed. And he was almost totally blind when he died, the time he died.
What about that? Another name that comes to mind was Everett Grantham. Wasn't he from around here?
He was from here, and he ended up as United States Attorney. A fine lawyer. And he drew my father's will.
Oh.
Used to practice up where I was.
Well, that'd have to be a few years ago.
Yeah.
Well, I remember Mr. Grantham.
He had a great lawyer as his partner, Charles C Spann of Albuquerque, who represented the banks, our bank a lot when I couldn't.
Well, now, was Charlie Spann here in Clovis before he went to Albuquerque?
No, he was in Albuquerque.
Okay.
But he was a great lawyer. Died very suddenly.
Yeah, I knew Charlie.
Died very suddenly.
Nice fella. What about Howard Howe? Because he originally from around
Fine
here?
lawyer. He was also U.S. attorney.
Wasn't he from here originally?
He was from here. He's from the Hawk family here.
Well, we've had kind of a legacy of great lawyers come out of this little burg.
Well, we had some good ones.
And, so many of them moved away.
The first one of them you have mentioned is A.W. Hockenhout, who didn't practice much law, but he ended up being governor of New Mexico. And he's the one who appointed Carl Hatch the United States Senate.
Well, I knew Governor Hockenholt, and there was a character for sure.
Big Baptist.
Oh, yes.
Nice man.
Yes, real nice man.
He strongly believed in the death penalty, which always surprised me that he would, because he was such a gentle character, But he was a great speaker, much in demand as a speaker. Never really practiced a lot of law, but he was a lawyer.
Well, now there were a number of other, I think of old-timers, and I know most of them weren't lawyers, but they were compadres of your father, Joe Wilkinson and Cash Ramey and people like that were old-timers around here, and those were really kind of the pioneers of this community, I guess.
We did a lot for it.
And, I'm curious, and I know, Lynell, you spend a lot of time on a computer now when you're not busy taking care of bank work or whatever, but what else have you done kind of as hobbies to occupy your time when you weren't practicing law or taking care of the bank?
I really don't have any hobbies. I flew for a while. For a number of years I flew. But I got too old for that. Still like to fly.
Didn't you play
Get
golf?
the urge every once in a while to go out.
Didn't you play golf years ago? I remember you showing me a golf club that you used to carry around.
But I'm no golfer.
Well, you had a golf club, I remember, that you showed me years ago that you used
adjustable golf club.
had an adjustable golf club.
Still got it.
You don't see many of those around anymore.
You can still buy them.
Is that right?
Yeah, I found them on the internet the other day. They still make them. They sell it for, I think it's $99.
Oh, gee. Let me ask you a little bit. Have you ever been involved in politics as such?
Not much.
Just never?
Not much.
And I believe, I know that you were a student at one time, and maybe still are, of Roman Catholic Church law.
Yeah, Canon Law.
Canon Law, yes. How did you get into that?
I don't know exactly how I did. It was before the Da Vinci Code, I can tell you that. I just got interested in it. I don't know. It's probably something I read someplace. And you can get, I have it here, one of them here, you can get a copy of the Canon Law. Here's a commentary on the Canon Law.
My gosh.
This is the latest one out. And It's quite good. It's annotated.
Well, it looks like you've been in it a few times. You've got a lot of places highlighted and marked.
I messed around in it a little bit. It's a very interesting subject because, to my knowledge, it is the only religious institution that has a legal basis, what I call a legal basis. It is their law. It is the law of the Catholic Church. And they follow it pretty well, believe it or not, as to what they can do and what they can't do and how they do it. And it's an interesting subject. We have a complete court system, and it's really an extraordinary organization, and that's why it's still living, still alive and functioning. And they were, I forget to say, but they were citing the Canon Law the other day in the press. So everybody knows about it. And you can find it. You can find the whole Canon Law if you go to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops on the Internet. They give you the whole Canon Law. Marvelous Internet site.
Well, is this just something that you decided to kind of get and
just mess around in it?
Mess around in it?
Yeah, you know. It's interesting, and things come up, and you can answer them, you know. You can guess what they're going to do. I've never filed, for example, the most common thing is to invalidate. People have been divorced, and they want to invalidate the divorce so that the parties can take communion again.
Right.
And this is the subject probably that's the most used in the United States, is that aspect of it. But it really, it's a combination of Constitution and law, both. And it's the way the Catholic Church operates. And there's no secret about it. Anybody can pull up on the Internet and read the Canon Law.
Well, that is interesting. I don't know from what Canon Law, what it evolved from. I know it's been there for a long time, but
it's been there an awful long time, and it's been changed. I'm trying to think. He made a change here the other day, and I can't remember what that was. But the Pope simply changes it. It's an edict, and it becomes the Canon Law. And I don't have it in this volume. I've had this one 2 or 3 years, and I got a set at home of the prior deal. It's in 2 volumes, but it's really kind of an interesting subject.
Well, I'm sure it is. Let me ask you this. I know here in the last several months you had some surgery that on your Achilles tendons, I believe, that kind of incapacitated you.
I'm trying to find somebody that can sue Levaquin for me.
That's the antibiotic?
It's the medicine I took. It was a medicine for sinus infection. And it managed to destroy both my Achilles tendons, both legs.
So when did you have that surgery?
I had that surgery about February 16th this year. And I spent an unhappy 2 months with a bedpan, and then another month where I could go to the restroom by myself, but that was all. And I can't get over not having a shower for 2 months, but I did.
Well, how are you getting along now?
Oh, I'll probably be all right by the first of the year. I'm getting so I can hobble around, but I still use my little walker just to keep from breaking my stupid head on the sidewalk, you know.
Well, are you still coming into your office every day?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I know you and I used to have this little contest, and you were always beat me because I'd try to go in my office early, and when I'd drive by the bank, you were always here, so I gave up on that.
I come at 7.
I gave up on that.
Yeah.
But now that you're doing better, you're coming in every day again?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I guess you, in addition to your law practice, you're chairman of the board of the Citizens Bank?
Banks don't run themselves.
Right.
It take a lot of time. You know, we're a regulated institution. And you're constantly, that's what I'm working on now, is this right here. The Bank Secrecy Act and the Anti-Money Laundering Examination Manual. You have to put all this down and adopt it in your bank. You can see down there those white volumes.
Right.
That's all stuff, banking stuff that we have adopted and how we operate the bank. You have to keep all this stuff up to date all the time. Really, every bank, every community bank ought to have a lawyer all the time. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
Well, I know there are an awful lot of regulations.
And of course, there's not that many banks. There's, I believe, 63 banks in New Mexico. But every one of them ought to have a lawyer sitting with them all the time.
Well, and I think, years ago, wasn't that kind of the norm, that banks would have a lawyer, and they've just kind of gotten
away? For example,
away?
Judge Hatch, Skarda Hatch, he was attorney for the Citizens Bank of Clovis. And Everett Grantham, that you mentioned, was attorney. And Howard Houck did some work for the bank also when he was here. So all of them did. But the bank is much larger now than it was then. And we have $120 million in loans. And we're regulated by the FDIC, the Federal Reserve Board, and the Director of Financial Institutions of the state of New Mexico. So you got 3 of them.
Well, wasn't your bank one of the first ones around here to go get online banking?
We were the first bank in New Mexico to do that.
And I'm sure that was because of your...
Let me put it, we were the first bank in New Mexico to have a credit card.
Really?
Yeah.
Boy, that's...
Well, I don't know what's a claim to fame or not.
Well, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's at your behest and insistence that you modernize like that.
Well, T.E. Willman was president of the bank then, and we thought it would work. So we got with it, and we went up and we associated ourselves with Colorado National Bank. Never will forget that. We drove up there to see how the deal worked, you know. And big bank. This guy was in a huge room. You never saw so much debris in your life, you know. But everybody was using the credit card and nobody was paying. And they were trying to trace them down, you know. They had all kinds of limitations on it. Women couldn't have cards. You'd only issue cards to people of substance, you know. Now, I suppose, a German Shepherd dog could get one of the damn cards, you know. They issue them to everybody, you know. You know, the whole thing evolved down and changed. And credit cards now are as common as dirt.
Right.
And they work. They're a great convenience. Of course, the computer made it possible, you know. And it's just amazing change over way it started out. they so limited the cards originally, and had a humongous amount of trouble with them. Just staggering losses. But Visa card is they bought Bank of America card. Bank of America was the card we issued.
How long ago was
I wonder
it?
why Bank of America gave it up. It was, I think, the biggest thing they ever had.
How long ago was that you got into the credit card?
Oh, Lord, I don't know. 20 years ago.
I think every bit of that, really, probably.
Well, let's see, TE. It would be about 1983, early 80s. 20 some odd years ago, 27 years ago.
Do you, I know you maintain your license. How do you get your continuing education? I'm always curious about that.
You want to know the truth? A real pain in the ass. And if I could sue the state Supreme Court, I would. It's the most wasted time in a lawyer's career. Any lawyer worth his salt reads lots more than that just normally. I'd have to pick out these courses. I had Lucille bring mine down today as to what I'm missing. At the moment, I'm missing 5 hours general, 6/10 of an hour ethics, and 1 hour professional.
So do you get it online? Is that how you do it? Yeah.
I think it's a silly requirement, and I think it's relatively useless. For the lawyers at Albuquerque and Santa Fe that have these things going on constantly, it's no problem. For us down here, it is an expensive proposition, very expensive, for us to have to go to Albuquerque to spend a day.
Right.
It really takes you 2 nights to do it. You have to spend 2 nights, night before and the night afterwards, to get in 7 hours of credit.
Right.
It's going to cost you pretty close to $300 or $400 to do that. It's certainly not worth it. No question about it in my mind, and it should be changed. I've thought about writing nasty letters to the Chief Justice in this regard, and I'm afraid I would say more than would be appropriate in writing to the Chief Justice, but I think it's utterly ridiculous.
What would you think about, I think the realtors have a deal where once you reach a certain age, then you don't have to continue education. And
ours doesn't make any difference.
I know it doesn't. Do you think that would be something that they ought to consider?
Of course. Of course. It infuriates me every year to have to do it.
But you do it every year.
Oh, yeah. You bet.
Now, do you ever, I know that you and Charlie Spann were real good friends. And of course, Charlie's been dead for a number of years. Do you have any other lawyers around the state, people that you've known for years, that you maintain any kind of...
No, they're all dead.
You've outlived everybody? I was trying to think if there was anybody else from Clovis that...
Lewis Cox just died, last year.
Right.
He was a good lawyer.
Didn't he practice with Wes Quinn here years and years ago?
Yeah, he practiced with Wes Quinn. And Bill Bondurant phoned me one day and said, you know this guy Lewis Cox in your town? I said, oh, sure, I know Lewis well. He says, you think he's good enough to practice in our firm? And I said, yeah, I think with a little help he could be. And that's when Whitney became a senior member of that firm.
Right. That was the old Hinkle firm.
Yeah, Lewis did well.
Right. Yeah, he became a real stalwart of the profession, I thought. When
he was one of our main lobbyists. He'd been in the Senate. That's right?
I think that's right. I think that's right.
State Senate. And he knew his way around up there. And, but he was a nice man. And worked at his trade.
Let me ask you this, Lynell. Do you think the changes we've had in the practice of law over the years, you know, the way we used to try lawsuits, you just spend a little time getting ready and go try them, and now, you know, we spend months and months getting ready in the discovery and so on. Do you think that's an improvement over what we used to have, or is it overkill? How do you feel about that?
I think for the individual it's overkill. I think probably for the commercial world it's better. The little guy has a hard time in court now. Of course, we got the jurisdiction of the magistrate court up pretty high, which
Right.
takes care of lots of that, which we didn't have in the early days under the old justice of the peace system. But litigation has gotten terribly expensive. Has it added certainty and more truthfulness to the court? Probably yes. Not a great deal, but yes. And of course the litigation you have now is more complex, usually. You know, we have cow cases in our area, you know, who owns who, what cows. We have some title problems, not big ones. You're going to have more in the future because the title people don't know much about titles. You and I are from the period when we examined lots of titles, and the young lawyers can't examine them at all. And we're going to have, I think, a lot of problem with titles down the line.
Right.
But yes, of course, the whole mechanism of law is try to get to the truth. And as people become better educated, the truth is harder to get to. But the fact remains that litigation is so expensive that the average guy just can't hardly afford to go to court. And if you look at our docket, if you look at the Supreme Court docket that comes out in our bar bulletin every week, most of the cases on appeal are criminal. Very, very few civil litigation. And this boggles my mind. Why is it that way? You know, the problem of people in the penitentiaries has always bothered me. Ever since I was district attorney, it's bothered me. It bothered me when I was in the military service, because we sent guys to the disciplinary barracks, you know. As a matter of fact, we had a first sergeant who was a black man, Negro. I prefer to call them Negroes. He had a PhD from Columbia in biology. And we prosecuted him for murder and convicted him. You know, things like this, I just don't understand. The crime, they say the rate is down, but I think the people that are sending to the penitentiaries is not down. They're bulgy, horribly expensive. Over here at Amarillo, we got one with what is it, 2,500 prisoners. And then beside it, they have another building for the prisoners with psychiatric problems for 450 people. The cost of this is just staggering. I figure in my own mind we spend $25,000 a year to incarcerate anybody in the penitentiary. If that money could be put into education, my gosh, it'd be a staggering amount of money. And nobody's paying any attention to it anymore. It boggles me. There has to be some answer to it. Europe doesn't have the problem that we have in this country. Nowhere near the problem. In no other country of the world do they have the problem that we have here with criminals.
Well, it's kind of been interesting to me because when I started, we had one district judge here that was Curry, Roosevelt County, and so on. Judge Hensley, I think, was on the bench, E.T. Hensley Jr. when I started, and now we've got 5 district judges in the 2 counties, and of course our population certainly hasn't increased that many fold, and I don't know whether it's a drug thing or what it is, but it seems to me that times have sure changed and not for the better.
Well, the recidivism issue, the repeated incarcerations in the penitentiary, the same guy, is a large part of it. Years and years ago, Governor Rockefeller personally funded a study of what to do about the criminal law and sending people to the penitentiaries. And he assembled this, he paid for it. I think it was $350,000 as I recollect the figure. He paid for them, and they sat down and they communed and came up that there was no answer. But we need, of all the things we need in this country, we probably need some solution to that more than anything else. Not only is it terribly costly, but it's terribly inefficient. And what we're doing is not working. It's simply a failure, a total failure. True, we can isolate them out here, but beyond that, we've accomplished nothing.
Do you have any personal thoughts as to?
I don't have. I've read on it and studied on it, and the press talks about it all the time, but you still have it. We have essentially a fairly active religious training in the United States, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish. We have people for Islam, but we still have the same criminal problem. And I don't know what the answer to it is. But of all the things we need an answer to, that is one of the most pregnant ones of all, in my opinion. And I wish we could do something about it before I die. I'd sure like somebody to take a crack at it. Whether it's another commission to be put together or what. But the costs of it are just staggering. Just staggering.
Well, you hear some people say that, the proliferation of drugs in our society anymore contributes as much as anything to the increase in...
I think that's a very big factor. So you have a lot of bank robbers don't take drugs.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you can think of that you have found interesting over the years that you've been toiling at the helm, so to speak? That how about advice for young lawyers, people that are either just entering the
I'm more
practice-
worried about the Dallas Cowboys at the moment.
Would you recommend the legal profession to, like if you had a grandson or a granddaughter that was thinking about becoming a lawyer, would you
I got a
encourage her?
granddaughter just about ready to graduate from law school.
Did you encourage her or discourage her, or just leave it to her?
She didn't ask me.
If she had asked you, what would you have told her?
Yeah, fire at it if you think you'd like it. You're going to graduate from Rutgers, I think, next semester. She's the one who graduated from Oberlin. My son Jeff's daughter. Miss Jennifer, I call her.
Now, Jeff practices law down in Texas, does he?
Yeah, in Houston.
Houston, okay. And he's the only lawyer that emerged from your children. And
Yeah, he's the only one.
I know you have a daughter, Patty, that's
She's a college professor.
got a PhD and teaches at Smith College back
And
east.
Katrina retired from teaching art. And but the kids have all done well.
Well,
I'm proud of them.
you deserve to be congratulated. You've not only been around a long time, but I think you've made a real contribution to the profession.
Well, I don't know whether I have or not. Our work on the Uniform Jury Instruction Civil was of note. That was probably the biggest accomplishment, I think, getting that done. And the Bar Association, the committee that keeps them up to date, it keeps our law, state law up to date, has really done, I think, a magnificent job. And nobody's ever thanked them. But we have most of the uniform laws, and that's good,
Right.
because most of them are good. And really, I think our state law is pretty well advanced. I think we're as advanced as any state in the union.
Well, I know we've always heard that we're kind of in the forefront on a lot
Yeah.
of things, which I think is a real testament.
And the bar has done that. Nobody pays them to do it. They just do it out of, I guess you say, love and affection.
Right. Well, Mr. Skarda, I'm going to cut into your lunch hour, and I don't want to do that.
Well, I thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to blab to you.
Well, this has been very interesting for me, I can tell you. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.